All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Banks. I've had to re-record this a couple times, so forgive me if I sound a little rushed. Today we're going to be reading some World Socialist website articles together. We're going to be going over them, reading them in full. I'll offer some of my own commentary along the way, and let's get into it. So a couple things about the World Socialist website. They've been around for a long time. They're a really, really good news source. If you need some unbiased, not unbiased, if you need some factual reporting about what's actually going on, and when I say unbiased, like everything has a bias, obviously, but one thing that America really doesn't quite get, I don't think, is that people in America think that there is a false equivalency between right and left-wing politics, which there isn't. Stupidity and ignorance and fear and bigotry lead to conservatism. And it is usually somebody who is denying facts or denying reality that leads them to form these conservative conclusions about things. And it leads to tribalism and whatnot, and obviously fascism and murder and genocide. So all of that out of the way, with my own personal editorializing out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this. So I'll leave some links to the articles that I'm going to be reading in the description. You can check those out for yourself. I highly recommend reading them for yourself. And also just doing more reading in general. I feel like not enough people are reading, especially the news. So this was posted about 16 hours ago. Today is Tuesday, March 12th. The White House reaffirms it has no red lines for Israeli war crimes by Damon. And I'm reading this off of my girlfriend's iPad right here. Thank you, Rachel, for that. The Biden administration reiterated Monday that the United States has no red lines for the war crimes it allows Israel to commit with U.S. weapons, amid mounting global opposition to Israel's genocide and deliberate starvation of the population of Gaza. I don't think it's productive to assign a red line terminology to what is a very complex set of policies, said Principal Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton at the briefing aboard Air Force One on Monday. I don't like her. These remarks reinforce a statement made by Biden in an interview with MSNBC that aired on Saturday, in which he declared, "The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line where I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them." That means that Israel is going to have unbridled support by America. Completely unhinged support. That Israel will be able to commit as much genocide as they want because America is committing genocide along with them. Excuse me. While reaffirming the U.S. position of unequivocal support for Israel, Biden criticized Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plans to invade Rafah, declaring, "You cannot have 30,000 more Palestinians dead." Now, I just think that's really funny how he's criticizing the Prime Minister of Israel for committing genocide when he himself is literally submitting weapons and arms and resources and whatever else they need. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It does make sense to me because it's obviously, it's all obfuscation, smoke and mirrors. That's what politics is. That's what the government does. They lie. Earlier this month, Biden had speculated that a ceasefire agreement could be in place by the start of Ramadan, which began on Monday. But the holiday began with a continuation of Israeli bombings and mass starvation. Over the weekend, 234 people were killed, according to Gaza's Ministry of Health. On the first day of Ramadan, 2 babies died of malnutrition and lack of medical supplies in northern Gaza, according to the health ministry. This brings the death toll from malnutrition and dehydration in the Gaza Strip caused by the Israeli siege up to 27. In a statement to the Anadolu news agency, Palestinian pediatrician Dr. Samer Labad, I apologize for mispronouncing names. I'm a measly little American white guy, So sorry about that. I will try my best. In a statement to the Anadolu news agency, Palestinian pediatrician Dr. Samer Labad, I keep wanting to put an R in there. I don't know why. Warned that Israel's blockade of food and medical supplies will lead to the deaths of many children due to malnutrition. The 2 infants died as the Israeli occupation army refused to allow food and medical supplies into northern Gaza, he said. He added that malnutrition occurs as a result of the lack of food resources for children, such as basic milk for premature babies and infants. The Defense for Children International, Palestine, said in a statement, the true death toll due to starvation is feared to be much higher as many Palestinians, particularly in northern Gaza, face famine and are almost entirely cut off from the limited humanitarian aid entering Gaza through the southern Rafah crossing. I apologize if I shake around or jitter. This is like my first time really trying to do this. So I probably have some nerves, but, forgive me. Ayed Abu Ektaish, Accountability Program Director at the Children's Rights Group, said, the starvation of children is a hallmark of genocide and a deliberate political choice by Israel, backed by the Biden administration. That's right. In a statement, Gaza's health ministry said 2,000 medical staff in northern Gaza are in need of food and are facing famine alongside the broader population. The health ministry said that the workers did not find anything to break their fast on the first day of Ramadan, adding, we call on international and relief institutions to quickly provide food to hospitals in northern Gaza. Now that is just tragic. That is horrifying. And it is all caused by the United States. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said in a statement, yet even though Ramadan has begun, the killing, bombing, and bloodshed continue in Gaza, stressing that the threatened Israeli assault on Rafah could plunge the people of Gaza into an even deeper circle of hell. I agree with that. I very much agree with that. If they're not already in the deepest circle of hell possible already. Because that's all this is, real life is hell. This is all we have. Al Jazeera reported a major escalation in bombings throughout Gaza on Monday, with 19 people killed in a series of attacks on residential homes in Rafah, Khan Yunis City, and Gaza City. The death toll continues to rise, with the Ministry of Health reporting that 31,112 people in Gaza have been killed and 72,760 wounded by Israeli attacks since October 7th. In a statement on Monday, the Euromed Human Rights Monitor warned of the soaring death rate among elderly people. Euromed said its field team is recording nearly daily deaths among the elderly due to Israel's systematic and pervasive crimes of starvation and treatment deprivation in the Gaza Strip, especially in Gaza City and the Strip's northern regions. I mean, they were literally claiming that a hospital had tunnels and a secret base inside of it, but that's neither here nor there. It added, the majority of these cases do not reach hospitals, which are only partially operational in northern Gaza because of the difficulty of access given the ongoing Israeli military attacks. Consequently, after dying at home, the elderly are buried either close to their residences or in makeshift graves dispersed across the Strip. There are currently more than 140 such cemeteries. Last week, Euromed published a report alleging the fact that Palestinian prisoners and detainees from the Gaza Strip who are being held by the Israeli army are being subjected to premeditated murder and arbitrary execution outside the purview of the law and the judiciary. It noted ongoing reports of international killings of Palestinian prisoners and detainees, while others were tortured to death in the Sde Taman camp and other Israeli detention centers and military facilities, i.e., concentration camps. Amid the ongoing genocide and mass starvation in Gaza, the war continues to widen in geographic scope. On Monday, Israel carried out strikes deep inside Lebanon, striking the city of Baalbek, 62 miles from the border. The same day, the US and UK carried out a new round of strikes on Yemen, killing at least 11 people. And that's it. That's the end of our little perspective there for now. So it's easy digestible articles like that I think are really useful in knowing basic numbers that are on the ground right there. What's going on. So that's our first article that we're going to read. Let's go ahead and look at another one. Let's see. And the cool thing is that my concept for this sort of video series was like a news roundup sort of thing, like a headline roundup originally. But I like the idea of going in depth in each article and reading them specifically and kind of getting like the thing that's going on. Here's another article by Andre Damon, another perspective. NATO plans for troop deployments in Ukraine threaten nuclear war. Now let's read that again. NATO plans for troop deployments in Ukraine threaten nuclear war. These plans are threatening nuclear war. That article title is a little awkwardly worded. On Sunday, the New York Times published an article by David Sanger titled Biden's Armageddon Moment, When Nuclear Detonation Seemed Possible in Ukraine. Excuse me. The article documents extensive and far-reaching discussions within the Biden administration in late 2022 regarding the possibility of the war with Russia turning into a nuclear conflict. Sanger reports that the Central Intelligence Agency told Biden that under a singular scenario in which Ukrainian forces decimated Russian defensive lines and looked as if they might try to retake Crimea, a possibility that seemed imaginable that fall, the likelihood of nuclear use might rise to 50% or even higher. Now that is the CIA telling President Biden that. That's insane. He reported that the Biden administration was making urgent preparations for a U.S. reaction to a Russian nuclear detonation. An article written by Sanger, a longtime mouthpiece for the U.S. military and intelligence agencies, is less a news article than a controlled release of information by the U.S. intelligence agencies. Now, this is what I mean when there's a lot of insightful reading into what the government says and what they're doing, instead of just pointlessly mouthing off whatever they said, The purpose of this article is to acclimate the public to the possibility of the war becoming nuclear, speaking about the article that was written, released by the U.S. intelligence agencies, not this one by the WSWS. It is also an attempt to place the onus on Russia when it is, in fact, the U.S. and NATO powers that are engaged in a massive escalation of the war, potentially involving the direct deployment of NATO troops to Ukraine. Over the past 2 weeks, 4 NATO countries, France, Canada, Lithuania, and the Netherlands, have stated their openness to sending NATO troops to fight Russia in Ukraine. On Saturday, they were joined by Poland, whose Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski declared that sending troops to Ukraine was not unthinkable. These statements were accompanied by the release of a recording of a discussion by members of the German military of the prospect of using German long-range weapons to carry out strikes on Russian territory. The immediate context for these actions is a series of disastrous setbacks for the Ukrainian war effort, raising the prospect of the total collapse of the Ukrainian army without direct NATO intervention. As a recent article in Foreign Affairs warns, without a surge in Western military aid and major changes to Kiev's strategy, Ukraine's battlefield position will continue to worsen until it reaches a tipping point, possibly by this summer. In other words, NATO has a window of just a few months to avoid a precipitous collapse of the Ukrainian military. That's wild. That's all the commentary I can come up with. That's wild. Sanger's article admits that in 2022, under conditions where the Russian military was facing a series of setbacks, the U.S. evaluated that it was entirely possible for Russia to use nuclear weapons to improve its military position. But it is NATO and the United States that now find themselves on the back foot, suffering serious defeats. If the Biden administration believed that Russia would use nuclear weapons in order to forestall military defeat, is that any less true for the U.S. and NATO? In a critical passage, Sanger writes, "The wargaming at the Pentagon and at think tanks around Washington imagined that Mr. Putin's use of a tactical weapon, ... involved a demand from Moscow that the West halt all military support for the Ukrainians. No more tanks, no more missiles, no more ammunition." But this is precisely the position that NATO is driving Russia to take by planning to deploy NATO troops to Ukraine. Every escalation by NATO raises the pressure for the Russian government to set an explicit red line to be enforced by a threat to strike NATO territory or use nuclear weapons. So I agree with that. I agree that NATO is basically pushing for nuclear war as much as Russia might be, you know? But I don't think that Russia is actually doing that. I think Russia is being run into the ground by a crazy madman. But this is precisely the position that NATO is driving Russia to take by planning to deploy NATO troops to Ukraine. Every escalation by NATO raises the pressure for the Russian government to set an explicit red line to be enforced by the threat to strike NATO territory or use nuclear weapons. The NATO powers recognize the very real danger that the conflict in Ukraine could develop into a nuclear war, but they are taking no measures to avoid such escalation. Instead of discussing negotiations that could avert this catastrophe, they are continuing to pursue a policy that could well result in a nuclear conflict with Russia. Need a drink. Having feared that a nuclear apocalypse could break out in 2022, the Biden administration and its NATO allies are now escalating the war to the point where that scenario becomes more likely than ever. So at the very end here, it has like a little call to action for the working class, which I actually kind of appreciate that they do those in their articles. It is urgently necessary for the working class to intervene and stop the relentless escalation of the Ukraine war. The growing global strike movement by workers around the world must be fused with the movement against war and armed with a socialist perspective. This movement must demand the immediate end of the war and the withdrawal of all NATO forces from Ukraine. So, good article. Now, a couple things that I want to say about that. It's really telling how much these governments want war, because war is profitable. War is profitable for capitalism. It's profitable for every country involved. Killing sells. Killing makes money. You don't have arms dealers without war. You don't have arms manufacturers without war. You don't have an entire military-industrial complex without the constant need for war. And NATO pushing Russia and pushing Ukraine and all of these different places is just further escalating the situation. I think that's all the time I have for now. I'm going to try to get these videos edited out. I'm going to try to get this done. I hope you guys enjoyed those 2 articles. I want to do more of these, so let me know if you enjoyed that. Let me know if you enjoyed the video by leaving a comment, thumbs up, subscribe, whatever you got to do. You guys know the drill. And I will probably have some other types of videos that I may upload, like some art appreciation stuff, like video game retrospectives. Who knows? But I don't want to. I want to keep my view kind of broad, because I care about too many things to not talk about all of them. You know what I mean? Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.